The Simon Necronomicon has long been the subject of speculation by prominent YouTubers. Often discussed is whether or not the book is a hoax or quote-unquote legitimate occultism. Today we will discuss the book's strange provenance. More specifically, we trace the origin of the book's numerous illustrated sigils, which were created in the 1970s by a man named Kem, a profoundly gifted wizard and Renaissance man.
My impressions of it are that it kind of rode on the coattails of the Satanic Bible, which was, the other kind of paperbackish available at an affordable cost, kind of, ooh, this is edgy and stuff like that.
Right.
The thing about that is that if you look at the Satanic Bible, it is, as far as magical concerns go, I mean, the guy basically took the Enochian calls, filed off the name God, and put Satan into place, right?
Right.
In my opinion, this may have been kind of somewhat addressing a demand for that bit of shock that people were looking for. Because, Peter Lavenda, who was Simon, did go to some sort of haphazard pains to try and connect together this idea of, because like some of the names like Shub-Niggurath evoke that Mesopotamian Sumerian kind of concept, like the Nam-Shub of Enki and things like that.
Yeah.
The thing about that is that the connection is pretty vague when you actually get into so you have the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, which sets it up perfectly for something a lot along the lines of like the Picatrix, which is considered to be like a highly influential grimoire that affected a lot of the Renaissance grimoires and medieval grimoires that we know of.
Can I ask a tangential question before we proceed?
Of course.
Do you think in the Picatrix, you'd find Pikachu as a particular demon that one might happen to conjure?
Why did you do this to me? Why are you like this?
I'm sorry. Why am I like this?
The guy
because I have kids.
How about that?
I have kids, and so do you. So I thought you'd appreciate that.
My kids aren't interested in what I do at all. I mean, they're more into.
But they're interested in Pikachu, though.
They actually never got into the Pokemon thing.
Oh, really?
There's no.
Good for you. Anyway, I'm sorry we got off on that tangent, but the Pokemon grimoire,
which that's actually one of the biggest influential grimoires in terms of it has the images of the degrees, which informed a lot of the appearances of demons all the way throughout today, as far as magical concepts go and practices like that.
Let's look at the text for just a second. So this, for those, I'm just going to go right to the first sigils. So these sigils right here, just to represent what we're actually talking about here. Peter Lavenda developed the Simon Necronomicon, or the Necronomicon, that came out in the 70s. And as he was putting it together, he asked your friend Kem to provide these illustrations. Can you just back up and first tell me like how Kem came to be involved in this project and why he was particularly propositioned to do this? Like, obviously he has an interest and certain abilities in this field of creating sigils. Just kind of give some background on how that came about.
So Kem was part of the whole scene at this magic text, or they call them metaphysical shops now, but it was called the Magical Child in New York, which was a whole cultural scene. What was unique about Kem is that he was one of the youngest editors at Weiser Publishing. If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look this up again. It was Kenneth Grant's works that he actually edited for Weiser Publishing, which that's fairly impressive because a lot of people find Kenneth to be very inspirational, although apparently his writing was just the most horrendous thing you'd ever seen.
Like pre-edited, you mean?
Yes, it was terrible. Anyways, so his level of intelligence, you have to understand, this is a guy who took his first hit of acid at the age of 12 from the Hells Angels and was already reading the Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn book, that big black brick, right?
Yeah.
And he was extremely knowledgeable. This guy was a genius on a level that I don't think I could even intimate. He could cite sources down to the page number mid-conversation on any topic you brought up. Deep spectrum Asperger's type fellow.
Right.
Anyway, so he was also an extraordinary artist, and he had already was well studied on Agrippa's techniques and things like that. So it was almost a no-brainer to see, here's this kid who knows how to do all this stuff. Let's pay him $300 to do this. That's literally what it was. It was $300.
Well, they gave him $300, and so
right.
if he created these, I mean, the text purports to be from the Mad Arab. It's not like they went and excavated an actual physical text and found these sigils. So Kem actually created these sigils from his own inspiration and from his own deep knowledge of magic squares and alchemy and astrology.
Well, he was already good friends with a guy named Harry Everett Smith, who was a Thalamite neo-Gnostic bishop, a guy who won a Grammy for the anthology of folk music he put together in studying that.
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yes, I actually inherited half of his library through Kem when Kem passed. So
his music library or his library.
His book library.
Oh wow.
It's actually sitting up there. There's another person that's in care of it, and there's so much to go through that it's just kind of sitting. Anyways,
is it at the Magical Child, or I mean, is it in New York, or is it with you?
It is in New York. The Masons were taking care of it prior, but now I think they've moved it somewhere else. I have yet to get up there to pick through it because at this point, I don't. Anyways, that's a whole different bag of worms. But the idea is that this guy had many connections with extraordinarily influential folks, and was good friends with them. So he was well positioned to have all this data and information readily available to be applied to this. And so when he did make those images, he tried to make them as authentic seeming as he possibly could for $300.
Right. So some people would right there say, oh, well, if someone just kind of created these for $300, then that on its face tells you that it's a quote unquote hoax. But if he's inspired to draw sigils, it's an inspired piece of art as much as any other sigil. And it's probably as someone from as knowledgeable about sigils as has ever written sigils before. I mean, you know what I mean?
I have to tell you about it.
Or maybe he was like $300. I'm going to get drunk and make a bunch of sigils.
Well, that's funny. The $300 ended up saving his life because immediately after he got that money, he came down with pneumonia, and his bosses at Weiser Publishing thought he was being lazy when he was sick. And then the friends he was staying with suggested he go to an acupuncturist because he couldn't get better from the sickness. Well, they had dirty needles, and that's how he got Hep C, which that's how he eventually passed. When I first met him, and I was going to get back to this. How did I meet him? It actually ties into a video that I did with you.
Okay.
The Haunted Tales Volume 2, where I told that big long story about stuff that happened. Immediately after all that happened, I came running to the place where I was getting primary sources for my papers, which was a site called Esoteric Archives that's done by Joseph Peterson, who edits medieval and Renaissance grimoires and things like that. Mm-hmm. He has the best editions of numerous grimoires that you can get out there. Anyways, back then there was a chat window that floated over it that you could communicate with, and they would talk about grimoires, and Kem was there as the archivist, and he would connect together topics and show the connection between the grimoires, and it was amazing. I jumped on there terrified because to this point you have to understand I was extraordinarily skeptical about anything to do with magical anything. It was very much a curiosity I'd had since a child that I was exploring kind of thing. So when I jumped into the Esoteric Archives chat, here I'm asking for protective symbols and things you can do to protect yourself against these horrifying things. He told me at first he was going to boot me because he thought I was a troll until he realized this guy's actually terrified. So then we started talking, and
his terror is real. Yeah,
that's right. It was real terror because man, I was wigged out. But when I told him that I was studying at Exeter, it went from chatting a little bit every day to literally chatting for hours straight every day to discussing constantly while I was writing and studying and everything like that. We talked for hours a day. And it was I think he kind of knew that he was on borrowed time at that point, which that was back in 2010. Because he told me, you need to save every conversation that we have.
So when you were corresponding with Kem, did he ever mention whatever science or inspiration that informed him in the creation of these types of images?
So, as far as that goes, well, those were nothing. That was all Agrippa. He just went like, whatever. That was not a big deal.
So most of these are kind of inspired from Agrippa, because I've seen Agrippa's some of Henry Cornelius's Agrippa's work, and it is quite similar to this.
Yep. You'll also find some things that look like I forget what the presentation of astrological imagery in a square type form rather than the big circle with all the degrees and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
That one in particular is a lot like the ones where you find the seal, the moon with they almost look like the Chladni plates. Anyways,
but just real quick, something like this, just the image on the screen here, like how would you? I mean, some people might look at this and they don't know how to read it, or they might look at it and it just looks like scribble. I mean, I don't even know very much how to read it. I could say that inverted triangle at the top with a line through it, it's like a 4 elements earth sign. Am I barking up the wrong tree here, or is that part of what this signifies? How does one? I mean, you might not even know, but how would he intend this, and how might one interpret it?
You're absolutely correct in seeing the earth sign, because if you look at the context of this situation, you're seeing that Venus and Inanna are correlated within the cosmology of this text. Venus being earthy, so of course he would use the art for earth, the alchemical symbol for earth within this. Now, as far as I could probably dig up and see if that the spirit or intelligence of Venus looks similar to that. Although there are, like I said, some of these are kind of scribbly. They do remind me of some of the stuff from the Grimorium Verum, where it's literally just a blah of scribbles,
right?
Where it's a storyline. Because this does not look like it was derived from any sort of table. It doesn't look like it came from a magic square where it's.
But considering I'm sorry to interrupt, but considering the person who drew this, Kem, and his depth and of knowledge, you wouldn't just say like that this was a prank, or like he was trolling us by saying, "Oh, I'm just going to make this look spookily mystical, and do a few scribbles that kind of resemble Agrippa, and ha ha ha, jokes on you."
Oh, no.
There has to. I mean, I'm sure he's putting some like occult rationale, or some occult inspiration. There must be some occulted meaning behind this, or inspiration behind it.
As far as this goes, I would say you got it in the first go, where he did find the symbology that correlates it to Earth, as Venus is correlated. But beyond that, I'd say, other than the symbol at the top, which looks kind of significant, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, because the 6-sided figure in Platonic solids is considered to be the symbol of Earth. So I'm not sure about that eight-sided that little wheel on the right.
Yeah.
But I'd say either numerically, the one on the right has to have some significance. On the top, that figure looks like it came from Agrippa or some other text. They're actually on Esoteric Archives. He has a fantastic catalog of imagery of all the symbols from all these old texts, which I could look at. I'd probably dig through that, because one of the things that people don't realize when I say, "What does this symbol mean?" Oh, that is such to reverse engineer anything is immensely difficult.
I mean, it seems like
as far as what I see, you got it right on the head as far as the symbol for Earth from alchemy. I think that was about as deep as he went, especially when you talk. I know $300 is not a small sum in that time, but it also isn't big.
In some way, it's kind of like, who are we to, with our vague understanding, for me in particular, because I don't know nearly as much about this stuff as you do, but like, you know, if these are ascribed to or connected with higher powers, demons, spirits, and if there is any kind of actual correlation between these symbols and those entities, like in this case, Inanna,
Right.
we are groping for whatever scraps we can come up with. Where
I will say, he has a wicked sense of humor. The thing about this is that we always talk about, well, we never laid down this idea that there was this kind of hoity-toity one true way to make a magical text. The thing that we were more concerned with was the memetics and semiotics that are attached to that corpus that we call grimoires. And when you talk about things like Lovecraft, okay, say you do get results, and this is something I often criticize of folks that do chaos magic and then talk about evoking, like, what's that one old cartoon with Tinky Winky? I forget, the Teletubbies. They evoke the Teletubbies of the four elements or whatever. Anyways,
that's hilarious.
the thing is, okay, you get results. It's fantastic. Are they communicable to anyone? If you do get something that you want to actually discuss and talk about, are they actually meaningfully communicable on the point where you have John Dee creating a mechanical scarab that flies and terrifies people so much he was almost burnt at the stake over it when he was in college? We're talking about levels of creativity that were unheard of as a result of these insights that people had interacting supposedly with these entities historically.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the stuff like, using a Lovecraftian text, I'm like, okay, I mean, I suppose, of course you can have an experience, but to what end and what use? Because this is one of those things where whenever I talk about the corpus hermeticum, the idea is that things are purposed through their use. So the use of Lovecraft is this highly, like, I don't want to say nihilistic, but very bleak, cosmic insignificance, right?
Mm.
But did you ever try one of some of the rituals in there? You said that you were kind of messing around. This is like D&D.
Well,
Did you ever try?
I was just a novice, mainly as like a lark for, we were probably just
Details,
trying to impress girls or whatever. So
impress girls.
And I probably worked. Yeah, we were like, hey, we're gonna do some rituals. At night, build a fire in the middle of the desert, conjure the fire deity.
Oh, that's right, the Gate of Fire or whatever that was with.
Yeah, so instead of going out to a bar, we were too young to drink. It was conjure fire deities. You didn't have to be 21. But
did anything happen when you did it?
No, not really. I mean, maybe not to us. Maybe something happened like in China. Something happened in some other dimension or something. Who knows? But I mean, I'm just saying, like, and I'm kind of in agreement with you. I mean, on a certain level, what does it matter what kinds of visions you have if you can't share them or communicate them? But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm kind of like a Jamesian pragmatist. By that I mean, like, you can have visions, and you can create your own religion, like Joseph Smith, for instance. The religion he created was one of prophecy, like a Mohammedan kind of prophecy. Like, I have this seeing stone, I'm creating this new religion through these texts, and anyone can do that. Anyone can claim to do that, and but the very fact that you cause humans to kind of follow you and to follow your vision obviously adds some kind of credence to what you're doing, and as was the case with the prophets of old, or any kind of seer or visionary from the past. So while what I'm saying is, while I think there's no way to gauge the efficacy of or the validity of some text that supposes to be in touch with demons or spirits or something, other than I mean, it's not like it's scientifically verifiable or something. It's just how convincing it is to people, and to the degree to which it catches fire.
Even within the occult community, they have what they call personal unverified gnosis, which I find interesting. It's like this even smaller gradient of did this really happen? You know what I mean? Does
Yeah,
this
right.
actually mean anything? But it is an interesting thing that you bring up, because if we look at the pop culture of the thing, it is kind of lending to this idea that um, these magical concepts, not only are they legend tripping, like you're talking about, this adolescent rite of passage kind of thing, of daring the darkness, of tempting fate and things like that. Like when kids would steal off to some sort of haunted locale on a dare
Hmm.
and then do challenges and things like that.
Yeah.
This is actually a rite of passage in numerous cultures.
Hmm.
The thing that's interesting about this is that it kind of becomes, because of the pop culture draw, it becomes less about the idea of furthering humanity, that these noble aims, or less the noble aims of medieval and Renaissance magi. Because I mean, there's always the warning that wisdom is not benign. I mean, if you look in the Peak of Tricks, it is just as much like the idea of seeking for wisdom as much as how to poison your neighbor kind of thing. So I mean, it was very pragmatic, because the business of a magic or a magician was often with vengeance, asking for a curse. Even if you go to voodoo, they're asking for a gree bag, either to curse someone or to protect against something, things like that. Within curandero, which curanderismo is where I actually draw, because I'm half Mexican. My great grandmother's a curandera. It was removing el malo ojo from people that were concerned with, and that they thought they'd been cursed or something horrible was happening, things like that. I have stories about that. But anyways,
Oh,
um, it is that aspect of doing a communal service that is attached to that, all going all the way back to shamanism. For good or ill, you are always seeking to benefit the community that you're in,
right.
uh, or provide services for it that were beneficial in some way. Maybe not beneficial in the sense of ethics, but beneficial to the person getting something that they wanted, right? But when you look at these pop culture things, you are getting that level of escapism, where it's more about the aesthetics of the thing,
Right.
the dare of it, the shock of it. But then when you scratch beneath that surface, there is nothing. Kem, to his credit, tried to put something there by using um, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's, like, were not his methods, but they were
Mhm.
methods that he recorded of creating symbols, where he would
Yeah.
combine various figures. Like, he drew his inspiration from the quote, the sections on the spirits and intelligences of various planets, and these came across as interesting squiggly lines. Well, what's funny about those interesting squiggly lines is that those were the lines drawn between significant numbers as they'd appear on a magic square, usually
Yeah.
of various numbers. And you'll find magic squares, of course, within Agrippa's text.
I just have to say what I've read of it. I've read some of the conjurations way back when I was a kid. Um, I went right to the what I considered like the meat of it, but now I just kind of didn't even get far past the intro. Um, the long kind of introduction explaining these different disparate threads of like how this came to be, or maybe just more of like the inspiration behind it. And it dealt with Crowley and it dealt with Lovecraft, and it to me it read, not that this is necessarily something that is a point against it necessarily, but it read as a kind of a product of its time. If you were interested, if you lived in New York and you were interested in the occult in the 70s, you were going to be talking about, you know, Nazi occultism, which is referenced. You'd be talking about Crowley. You'd be talking about these kinds of things. And so I just felt like these were the kind of fertile grounds of inspiration for what this became. And I don't think that's necessarily to call it a hoax or anything like that. Um, I
That's what
I
you
tend
call
to
it.
have a very lenient view of these things. Like if something is inspired to come into being, there's something that inspires it to call it into being, and it doesn't have to be the fact that they like dug through some Sumerian sarcophagus to unearth this actual text. It could be like inspired from that ethos or from that aesthetic or whatever. Um,
I see what you're saying, and actually, this does mirror a concept, because when it comes to the practical aspects of the thing, I mean, even Kem himself would warn. He goes that any means of communications that is meaningful for the purpose of practice is effective. Which is why he would say, I mean, if you use a Ouija board, God help you if you get results, right? Because it's like, anyways, cool. They could have modeled it after Picatrix very easily, but instead they went this bizarre thing where they kind of followed the line of like the Ars Goetia, making it the names of the demons and the seals for them and everything like that. A little bit following kind of the Liber Juratus with the presentation of the steps of things. First this and second that, and etc. So they kind of, in my opinion, as far as making something that would be really cool and actually more evocative of Lovecraft's mysterious entities. I mean, like, you don't even hardly find the names that are recognizable of what you would find from Lovecraftian verbiage, which is just like weird soup of letters that are slammed together that you can't even hope to pronounce. Instead, you get this very Sumerian, bizarre thing that just feels very disconnected. A later version did come out it was Wilson's Necronomicon, which I believe Robert Turner was involved in that, and Robert Turner, if I'm not mistaken, did the book called Elizabethan Magic, which is a great text that puts together a bunch of stuff from John Dee as well as that era. But yeah, that is more true to the Lovecraftian concept, but it is kind of derivative of Kem's art as far as the artistry goes.
Wow.
So they don't.
Yeah, it sounds like a Renaissance man in so many ways.
That's right. Yeah. And very much so. Like, he was very, like, when I often made connections between him and John Dee with his library, and I received a shipment of books from him and things like that are still marked off by him. Bibliographies he'd be writing me at 3 a.m. when I'd wake up. I'd wake up with my kids to change their diaper. I'd check my email from people overseas that I was doing my studies with, and then all of a sudden I'd see him sitting there and said, Kem is typing. I'm like, Kem, what are you doing up? And I just thought this was something, and I wanted to type you this quick bibliography. And it would be huge. So even to this day, the funny thing is that I said, well, what is this? And he goes, this isn't for you today. This is for you in the future when you've read further, when you understand more, and then you can go through this.
Wow.
So in many ways, it's still to this day, when I go through those messages, it's very much like we're still talking.
Yeah. Wow. You should at least try to put the messages online, since there's so little of him out there on the internet.
Well, yes.
I mean, like, almost to publish his writing through, almost like an epistolary novel, like you're writing letters to each other.
Actually, I did talk to his biographer about exactly that. To me, it still is kind of emotional. I stand very much in his shadow, because he's literally taught me everything I know about esoterica.